Now that the season's over, let's talk about the future of the Capitals. What is the future plans of Alex Ovechkin, TJ Oshie, and Darcy Kuemper on the Capitals? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for 3 seasons for Locked On. Before that, on various other outlets. I'm also the host of the Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And you can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's being a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or on Google Play. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, now that we can put last season in the rear view, let's talk about next season. There was an interesting podcast put out today by Jeff Marek and Elliotte Friedman of the 32 Thoughts podcast. And they gave their thoughts on the future of the Capitals, how they played in the postseason, and ultimately what is going to be the future of certain Capitals players. And in that episode, they talked about what is the future of Darcy Kuemper on the Capitals. So we'll talk about that in the show. A little bit later, we'll talk about Alex Ovechkin and what is the plan of attack for him next season. Could he see a reduced role? And then we'll talk about TJ Oshie. Is there the possibility that he could hang up the skates? But just to get it going here, kind of reflecting already on last season or the games a couple days ago here. And it's an interesting thing how it's always on to the next one in sports. It's never, dwelling too long on what happened and what went wrong. It's already talking about the Capitals next season. And there is going to be quite a bit of offseason here. So I will definitely talk about the players and, things that could change in the offseason, the draft and that kind of thing. Pretty much, I will leave no stone left unturned. So we will get to it all in coming days as well. I will also talk about breakdown day and interviews, those kind of things. But the reason I'm pushing this to the front burner tonight as well, the 32 Thoughts podcast was put out, and there was some juicy morsels in there from Elliotte Friedman, who we know is a premier insider, and Jeff Marek, and their thoughts on the state of the Capitals and which direction this team can go in. And one of the more intriguing things that they mentioned in the podcast was the future of Darcy Kuemper. And is there the possibility that the Capitals could try and move Darcy? And one of the things is, of course, I think that I like that idea. I think that Charlie Lindgren, if we're going to use last season as a gauge, is a better netminder. He just is. And does that mean that Darcy Kuemper could be expendable? And Elliotte Friedman was the guy that spoke about it and the possibility, could the Capitals want to move Darcy Kuemper in some sort of trade? And I've talked about that in the show. And if you're an everydayer of the show, I've talked about it as much as it seems like it would be easier to move Lindgren because he's got 1 year left on his deal. He's signed to that bargain basement contract, and he's a really great netminder. So I could see why the Capitals would want to move him based on the return that they could get for him. I guess I never really put too much weight into Darcy Kuemper getting moved because he does have some term left on his contract. He's getting paid a lot of money. And he's posted his worst numbers this last season in his entire career. So I think the Capitals would like to move Darcy, of course, but is that ultimately going to be reality? So in this episode, that is what they talked about. And talking about the changes that need to be made, the Capitals got swept in the first round of the playoffs. It's safe to say that changes need to be made this summer before the start of next season, so the Capitals can be headed in the direction of being competitive again. Ultimately, that's what it's all about, the winning business. The question facing GM Brian MacLellan is who stays and who goes. We know changes of some sort will need to take place. Some just happen based out of necessity due to free agency and that kind of thing. That was one of the topics of today's 32 Thoughts podcast with Jeff Marek and Elliotte Friedman. One of the names they brought up was Darcy Kuemper. Elliotte thought the Caps might try and move him this summer. This will not be an easy feat considering he posted poor numbers this season and is getting paid a lot of money, and there is term left on his deal. Again, that is going to be the hard part. I think that the Capitals would be all ears as far as moving him, but I don't think that we can necessarily judge Kuemper just based on having one off season. We can't also forget the fact that he won a Stanley Cup at one time. We can't forget that the Capitals defense was quite horrible this year, and that it put Darcy Kuemper in a difficult position. So to say that Darcy Kuemper is a poor netminder just based on how he played last season is short-sighted and ultimately not fair to Darcy. But just taking a look at the back of his hockey card, he posted career lows in goals against, 3.31, a save percentage of .890. Kuemper finished the season with a win-loss record of .500, 13, 14, and 3, and did not win a game after February 26th. So that does seem to be the easy answer, and we do know that the Capitals want to get better, and I think that potentially they could get a pretty good return for him if the other team is willing to look past kind of a blip on the radar, I'm going to say, of this last season, that potentially I think that it could be big. But the difficult part, like I talked about off the top, is Kuemper has 3 years left on his contract where he makes $5.25 million annually. So that is going to be a team that is very hungry for change. That is a team that is definitely looking for an upgraded net. And there are quite a few of those teams around the NHL. It's just, are they willing to take the risk? Are they willing to take on the term? And are they willing to take on the amount, as he is getting paid a decent amount of money? That is why I never really entertained that thought too much. It's interesting that that was the direction that Elliotte chose to go in. Would a team be willing to take on that contract? If the trade was right, yes, but you'd have to think the Capitals would have to retain some of that salary. I think we would have to make it appealing to another team to take him off of our hands. And it's interesting that it seemed to be quite an accomplishment, quite a coup when Darcy Kuemper signed with the Capitals. At the time, he was coming off a Stanley Cup win, and we thought that that was a big thing. I thought it was a big thing. It's interesting how one poor season can sour his reputation. Now, to be fair, Kuemper has a Stanley Cup win on his resume. Let's not forget that. But in a league of what have you done for me lately, it might be difficult. What are some of the other things we know about Darcy is that he is prone to being bit by the injury bug. Historically, he just is, whether it's his fault or not. That is just a matter of fact. The whole reason this is even being spoke of is that Charlie Lindgren stepped up and played a huge role for the Capitals, starting 28 of the last 35 games for the Capitals after the All-Star break. Was clutch, was huge. Make no mistake about it, Charlie Lindgren is definitely one of the biggest pieces, if not the biggest reason that the Capitals made it to the playoffs, period. And if you are a casual observer of hockey or the Capitals, you might say, but Dan, look at, he faltered in the playoffs. The Capitals got swept. Again, the defense was not dialed in, and there was 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s, breakaways, you name it. That I think that if it wasn't for Charlie Lindgren being in net, that the Capitals would have been in a much worse position. I think that, I know they lost every game, but I think a lot of those games would have been more of a blowout, and that's just isolating the playoffs, not to mention last season when he was so huge for this team that I don't think the Capitals would have made it to the playoffs, period. But the back of his hockey card is looks a lot better. It's more glowing. And you take a look at it for the league lead in shutouts with 6. So quite a thing for him that he did have 6 shutouts on the season, and quite an accomplishment for a netminder that was considered to be a backup. A 25-16 record with a 909 save percentage. So definitely he does post the numbers of a netminder that is a number one. I think that Charlie Lindgren, if you were just taking a look at raw data, you would say that he is the number one, should be the number one. So why would we even talk about him being expendable? Let's talk about Charlie Lindgren here for a moment. Like I talked about off the top there, is that I think the Capitals could get a huge return just based on his play, based on the amount that he's getting paid, in the fact that he still has 1 year left on his deal. And I've talked about it. Ultimately, of course, I would rather have Charlie stay here. I just think that moving Darcy would be a tough move. But Spencer Carberry saying his praises as well. Chucky has been arguably our MVP. He's the reason we're in the spot we are, a large reason we're in this spot and made it to the playoffs. So, everyone knows it. The whole entire team saying his praises. And it's a difficult thing. I mean, if you take a look at it, even on his bobblehead night, Darcy Kuemper, he didn't start the game. So quite a tough season for Darcy. And ultimately, can he find his former glory? And what position would he take for the Capitals? Say some reason they're not able to move him. Are we going to go into next season paying Darcy a huge amount of money to be a backup netminder when Charlie Lindgren is making a fraction of that? That, I think, is in part where Elliotte's coming from, that I think the Capitals, if we don't have future plans of Darcy Kuemper on this team, it would be okay. It would be a good thing, actually, to kind of move him on to a different situation so we can concentrate on the future. So if we have, say, for some reason, the Capitals are able to make a move like that, they do have other excellent options down in Hershey. It's my belief that Clay Stevenson is the future netminder for the Capitals on the big team. And Hunter Shepard is no slouch in his own right. Stevenson led the AHL in shutout 7 as a rookie and posted a 206 goals against average and a 922 save percentage. Take a look at Hunter Shepard, just as good, was named AHL goalie of the year after winning 27 of his 34 games. Both of those goalies kind of vacillated back and forth from number 1 and number 2 in the AHL, that I don't think there is a loser in that bunch. So I think it is a fair thing to kind of take a look at what you have an abundance of. We know the Capitals need scoring. So if you could move out a piece like Darcy Kuemper, get a return, and kind of start building the future of, let's say, Charlie Lindgren as number 1 and either Clay Stevenson or Hunter Shepard as number 2, and kind of rebuild this team and have it ready for the future. Because, again, I don't think there is a realistic possibility, or it doesn't even make sense to keep Darcy Kuemper on this team next season if he's going to be the backup. It's a waste of money. It's not planning for the future. I think the Capitals should go all in. If they can pull something like that off, I just think that it won't be easy. And I think that ultimately the Capitals will have to retain some sort of salary. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about the future of Alex Ovechkin. Yes, the captain of your Capitals. Is there a chance he could see a reduced role next season? Let's talk about it next. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much more to get. Unique stickers you can trade with a friend to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot machine. And there's also new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on the Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So for me, this last season didn't go the way I wanted it to. And I'm not the kind of guy that likes to dwell on it. I want to move past it and talk about the future. And in the first segment, I talked about the future in net for the Capitals. And now let's talk about Alex Ovechkin. And all of these thoughts kind of come from the 32 Thoughts podcast, and it is a go-to podcast for NHL fans and Capitals fans. So I thought I would give you my thoughts on their thoughts, and ultimately, let's talk about Alex Ovechkin here next here. You take a look at him. It's an interesting season. He got off to his slowest start in his career in the goal scoring department. After the All-Star break, went on a frenzy and ended up scoring 31 goals by the end of the season, when I think he only had 9 at the All-Star break. So an about face, suffices to say. And then we went into the postseason, and he wasn't there. He was not in the equation. What happened with Alex Ovechkin, and how should the Capitals proceed in the future? Taking a look at Alex Ovechkin's season, 31 goals, 34 assists. Pretty good when you consider how he started. But then let's take a look at the playoffs. He was able to turn it on in the regular season, but in the postseason, in the playoff series against the Rangers, 5 shots in total in the playoffs, no goals, no assists. I think it is a fair thing to say that if Alex Ovechkin was more engaged, I think that if Alex Ovechkin scored more goals, that potentially the Capitals could have won at least a couple of games out of that series. Now I understand the reasons why. There's a couple reasons why. Well, for one, the Rangers were prepared. They were prepared for Alex Ovechkin. They know that he is a key contributor offensively and is who he is. Number 2 all-time in goals. It's safe to say that he is a guy that drives the engine as far as goal scoring is concerned. So what did they do? They had him covered. They had him double covered. And anytime he got off a shot, it was blocked. There was guys laying in front of it, or Alex Ovechkin shot it wide. So I think that is part of the equation. The other part that's a little bit more troubling for me is his feeling and what appeared to me of being disinterested, like he was checked out. And I think to a certain extent, he's just like, what's the point? They're going to block it anyway. And in the last game number 4, they were talking about how he was just kind of lingering around the blue line while the rest of his teammates were kind of trying to make a push on net. Like he was just getting ready there to maybe, I don't know, skate up and post up from his office. It just didn't seem like he was too engaged in the business of helping the Capitals win games. And that is one of the things that Elliotte Friedman talked about Ovechkin. They also talked about the Capitals might try limit Ovechkin's ice time next season. Ovechkin is almost reminded me of Dale Hunter. He said he played 8.5 minutes through 2 periods, and then they loaded up in the 3rd period, and he played 7 minutes. And again, that makes me wonder if next year is going to be about going for the goal record. If they want to make the playoffs, I wonder if they think they have to spot him a little bit too, like maybe limit his playing time a little bit or time on ice. It's interesting times that we live in, that Alex Ovechkin and all that he's accomplished is kind of coming up on the end of his career. We know that he is not going to be playing forever. We know that he is getting older and not getting that same production. 31 goals, that's nothing to sneeze at. But how he played on the big stage is, I think, what have a lot of Capitals fans and a lot of other people up in arms, like, what gives? What's up with Ovi? That if the Capitals, in fact, want to make a push for the playoffs next season, that if Alex Ovechkin is showing limited production, that they can't put all of the weight on his shoulders. And, we take a look at the Capitals to start the season. When he wasn't performing, they had Dylan Strome kind of pick up the slack. But that wasn't fair to Dylan Strome to just be the primary engine of offense. So the Capitals need more scoring up and down the lineup. Take a look at the Rangers as a team that did it well. They have several different guys on the team that can score goals on the regular. And not only that, they work well together. Oftentimes when the Capitals did get the puck during the series, it looked like they didn't know what to do with it. So if Alex Ovechkin, if he is not the guy that he once was, and it's kind of interesting because it is kind of his season vacillated back and forth. And then when he went to the playoffs, when we needed him the most, he wasn't there. So a lot of it will be next season, how he performs. But the one thing I know for sure is that Alex Ovechkin played his best hockey with Nick Backstrom as his center. Some would say that Alex Ovechkin would not be the goal scorer he is today if it wasn't for Nick Backstrom. So I don't want to diminish what Dylan Strome did for this team. I think that he did a pretty good job in the different other centers that cycled through with Alex Ovechkin, but they need that top six forward or top six center to maybe, facilitate more goal scoring for Alex Ovechkin. I think that is a worthwhile thing. And if it's not that, then if they can't find that top six forward, we know that those guys don't just grow on trees. And if you do get a player like that, you're going to have to give up a substantial amount to get a player like that he needs help scoring, whether it's a wing or whatever the case. We can't depend on Alex Ovechkin anymore to be the primary goal scorer. It's just not fair to him, and it's not reality. He is getting older. A lot of these players are getting older. And of course, we want to see an increased role from a lot of these younger players. But what I know for sure is that Alex Ovechkin, when we needed him the most, wasn't there. And there are Capitals fans that will say, I stand by him no matter what he does. And just take a look at what he did. He went from 9 goals to 31 from the All-Star break to the end of the season. And I hear all that. But when we needed him the most, when he needed to come up clutch for the Capitals, he just wasn't there. So I think, to kind of put a bow on this segment here, the Capitals do need a top six forward, a center preferably, to work in tandem with Alex Ovechkin. And if not that, they need other goal scoring in general, so the weight doesn't primarily rest on Alex Ovechkin's shoulders. And I think this team will be more well-equipped to make a deep push into the playoffs instead of getting eliminated in 4 games. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about TJ Oshie. Is there the possibility that after this season, we know the season is done, that he could hang up the skates? Is he pondering it? And is there the possibility that he is done with hockey? Let's talk about that straight ahead. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So if you're watching a Nationals game, or say you're watching an NBA playoff game, and you're not that interested, open up the FanDuel app and put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, the game is that much more exciting. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So TJ Oshie has been huge for this team, has been for years. But what is some of the things that are starting to kind of come into focus for TJ Oshie, as we can say that he's coming up on the back 9 of his career in the NHL, is that I think a long history of injuries is just kind of piling up. We saw him miss a substantial amount of time this past season with injuries. We know that TJ Oshie is a guy that plays much bigger than he is, regardless of the opponent that he's playing against. But there is certain feelings and certain observations that were made that potentially he could hang up his skates or that he might enter like the long-term injured reserve. And that was also one of the other topics on the 32 Thoughts podcast. But taking a look at Oshie this past season in 52 games, 12 goals, 13 assists. So that's, kind of on par somewhat for how he is. He's never been, on top of the Capitals, generally speaking, as far as goal scoring is concerned. I would say that is kind of where I project him based on how many games that he played. That isn't too alarming for me. What is alarming for me is that he missed 30 games this year due to injury. That is something that needs to come into focus. That is definitely something that probably TJ Oshie is taking a look at, is that how long am I going to keep doing this? This is wreaking havoc on my body. What do I do about my future? Like I said, it's primarily been back issues. Taking a look at him in 3 seasons, he's missed 92 games due to injury. That is a substantial amount of time for a guy kind of like Darcy Kuemper that is prone to being bit by the injury bug. But again, why is that? It's the brand of hockey that he plays. TJ Oshie gives 100% every time that he is on the ice, and subsequently why he is often injured. We know what he means to this team. The young players love him. His hockey IQ is off the charts. He brings the best out in his teammates, but he's been through the ringer as far as injuries are concerned. And Friedman mentioned that he lingered on the ice for quite a while after the game was over. Is there the possibility he might call it a career? That would leave a hole in the lineup for the Capitals that they would have to fill as well. And that was my thoughts on it. And what Elliotte Friedman mentioned as well is he said that Oshie lingered on the ice for a long time. He got to the 1,000 game this year the hard way. Dylan Strome said he played with a broken hand. He's got 1 year left. His body has been through a lot. I'm not saying I know here because I don't, but when someone told me he'd been out there for a while late, he was the last guy to get off. He kind of lingered around a bit. You have to at least think if he's considering the possibility, ... And that could give them a lot of LTIR flexibility. Now in the offseason, it's trickier, but when you're looking for offense, what's the most expensive to find? Scoring. So the future of TJ Oshie on the Capitals is a bit murky. He has not come out and said what his plans are for the future. I don't think that he knows for sure yet himself. He is the ultimate competitor. He was the guy in training camp that said even when he gets together with his family for Thanksgiving and they play football, he's playing to win. And he said that when he's wrestling with his brothers and relatives that he gives 100%. And then he looked around the press corps. He's like, what, you don't wrestle with your relatives? So he is a competitive guy. And that is, what we love about him. He is a likable guy, like I talked about. The young players love him. They look up to him. He's just got an outwardly positive attitude. And it would be a big hole to fill on this team. And, you take a look at him. He has always been a good goal scorer, but that I don't think that is necessarily what he's known for. It's his playmaking ability, his hockey IQ, putting his teammates in a position to succeed. So sometimes it's more of the intangible things than just, this is a guy that scored 40 goals, those kind of things. He is a good goal scorer in his own right, but he is, like I said, I think his body is kind of just showing a lot of wear. I'm going to be honest with you. So there are a lot of questions about his future. Would he entertain the thought of retiring? That would be walking away from some money, or the LTIR thing that they mentioned there. There is a lot of questions, but one of the things I know, and I've talked about that on the show quite a bit, is that this 2018 group of players that a lot of the fans are fond of are getting older. We saw diminished returns from Alex Ovechkin, TJ Oshie, Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey indefinitely. I would be surprised if we ever see him again. That we have to embrace change, because change is coming towards the Capitals, whether they're ready for it or not. That is the tough question. How aggressive will Brian MacLellan get to this offseason? What will this team look like in the fall? I do think that, there are some players in Hershey that are due for a promotion. I guess it depends on how they fare in the Calder Cup. I think that, Ethan Frank definitely deserves a look, being such a fast skater. Pierre Dubé maybe might get a longer look as well, that there are a lot of good options. We've seen the players that have gotten called up that did a good job. LaPierre, McMichael, Scarbosa did a good job. So taking a look at it, it's going to be interesting to see what the face of this team is going to be next season and the seasons to come. It's kind of exciting for me to think about, as I'm ready to kind of put a bookmark on this current core and start talking about the next batch of players. I think that, we've made this push with this crew long enough. Now I want to see what this next wave of players is going to look like. I make the comparable to the Nationals quite a bit because they were facing a similar thing where they moved Scherzer and Trey Turner and Juan Soto, but they got a tremendous return and going to have a truly great outfield. That the Capitals need to embrace change. They might need to move some bigger players that hard to wrap your head around. Like, I can't believe they moved Oshie, or I can't believe they moved, this player, that player. But that is what's going to need to take place if this Capitals team wants to be competitive in years to come. We've seen what they have. Now we need to turn the page and get ready for what's next. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.